My name is Elizabeth, and I'm a lead instructional designer for Pearson Professional Initiative for Turkey and Middle East. Today, our exciting audience will be joined by Gary Smith, who is a university professor, a lecturer, and entrepreneur. He teaches the marketing, entrepreneurship, and business courses at various universities, and we're blessed to have him as our facilitator for business strategy and entrepreneurship courses. Hi, Gary. How are you doing today?
Hello, Beth. That's very kind. A good introduction. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So Gary, let's speak a little bit about entrepreneurship itself, since I think it's a buzzword used around different platforms quite a lot. So if you don't mind telling our audience what it is about and how do you feel about entrepreneurship in the region?
I think before we do, I think people need a history lesson of where it came from. And
Sure.
Unfortunately, being the age that I am, I lived through it. So you laughed far too quickly there, Beth. In the late 70s and early 80s, the UK and the US literally rolled back the state in response to high inflation, boom bust. And people forget that back then virtually every country was state controlled. If you Google the companies that started with British back then, you'd have a list for 3 pages of A4. Now you could write them on the back of a postage stamp. So the US and the UK in particular started deregulating and selling off publicly owned organisations, and it really started back then. And I think it was 1982, if I'm not wrong, was the first entrepreneurship conference, the first ever in the world.
Oh, and they were calling it entrepreneurship back then?
1982.
Okay.
I think nobody had heard of it, to be perfectly honest. Someone called me an entrepreneur back when I worked for Kodak, and for a moment I thought they'd insulted me, because it's one of those words. It's one of those words that people use, but usually out of context. And actually, they were correct. The way we were doing business was entrepreneurial, but I didn't know it at the time. So it's a relatively new study area purely for academics. So I think it's invaluable that people who are in business or studying marketing or doing both, or are just interested, actually do study entrepreneurship, because it's, as a definition, it's very hard to nail down when you don't know the history, but also some marketing as well.
Interesting. And so, Gary, you mentioned that when you were referred to as entrepreneur while working in Kodak, you then realized that that was exactly correct. And you said that this is exactly how you were doing business. So what are some of the defining characteristics of doing business as an entrepreneur?
Probably, if you're looking at it from a marketing point of view, there's quite a few academics, Carson being one of them, who calls SME marketing in context. So you're not proving theory, you're actually reacting to real life situations. So if you look at it as a visual Venn diagram as such, you have marketing context in the middle, and then you've got competency marketing, network marketing, adaption of marketing, and innovative and entrepreneurial marketing. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but when you look at it, small companies in particular, networking was one of the key factors. And when I worked for Kodak, I did a lot of networking. Plus, we didn't have social media back then, so there was no online networking LinkedIn profile. Your profile was you. Pressing the flesh, not clicking the buttons. So when it was the age of Kodak just before it fell. it was in digital marketing, and I ended up working in the digital science business unit. And basically, our business model was in complete opposite to what Kodak had run for most of their lives, business lives. So I literally looked after, from a sales and marketing point of view, the UK, Ireland, Middle East and Africa, and I did not have one person working for me at Kodak.
Wow.
It's all done, and it was £15 million worth of business I grew it to.
Amazing.
So business could be done without mobile phones and LinkedIn back then, funnily enough.
Not that we know about it now.
We did survive without them, but when I explain this to students, they look at me as though I'm making it up. And it was all done through this. So you would call that, from a marketing point of view, one of the 4 P's place. It was all done through distribution and partners and added value partners. So when you look back, they were correct. We looked after our distributors and the resellers. We didn't have any contact with the end users, but you were through the channel. You did all your marketing and all your networking through the channel. So it was. And looking back, it was very exciting when you think of how Kodak was run, because you look at a company like that and consumer, which was the biggest business unit by far and created massive profits. People forget as also that Kodak's profits were 80+% in consumer.
Wow,
huge.
that's amazing.
It is. It's a huge revenue earner. So they had product specialists, marketing specialists. They had a specialist and customer service people for every single product they had. So it was very, very human heavy, whereas ours was extremely flat. I just reported to the worldwide boss. That was it.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So that must have been a completely innovative division that you were heading at the time.
Yes, it was. And we didn't really know it. We would, and that's when I studied it, and you looked at this, the models that people have put together, and some of them I've studied, but this is a very new subject and a very new lens to look through things. So there's nothing nailed down here. It's more the spirit and the vision of marketing rather than proving theory. But the things that a lot of academics say is like proactiveness, opportunity focused, calculated risk taking, innovativeness, customer intensity, resource leveraging, and value creation. They're some of the things that have been topics or the specifics that sort of business, those dimensions based on entrepreneurial orientation and market orientation. It's when you look at firms now, resource leveraging is key, because there's so many small companies now. They don't have, and SMEs are very similar, depending, it doesn't matter what segment they're in of the industry. SMEs are usually identified by their lack of resources, human and financial. So they have to be quick, nimble, and reactive and proactive as well. And that's the key, I think.
Yeah, it's funny how entrepreneurs refer to SMEs as small and medium enterprises, and I, as instructional designer, refer to SMEs as subject matter experts. So for our audience, Gary is referring to enterprises, not experts.
Yes, we're looking at, that's the other thing as well. We look at SMEs by head count, where I'm from the UK. And you're looking at, when you're looking at entrepreneurship, you do have to have a little bit of history, but you also need to know the business landscape, and it's changed dramatically.
Oh, in what way?
Well, since the year 2000, we've had, in the UK alone, there's 2 million more businesses.
Wow.
Sorry, that's incorrect. It's 1.5 million to over 3 million, so it's doubled.
Oh, wow. That is incredible.
And they're just the unregistered companies.
Okay, so what is the impact of such a growth?
Well, basically, looking at the business landscape, you're looking at over 99% of all private sector businesses were SMEs. And 99% were small or SMEs. So the amount of people they employ, this is just the UK, and the US is very similar. And now we're sitting in the UAE here. It's similar too. The trend is towards a much larger SME base of business. The big companies are getting bigger, but they're not getting bigger in number.
Okay, yeah, that explains it pretty well. So what is, for people who are trying to enter this kind of market, and specifically referring to the UAE, what are the things that they need to keep in mind considering the current landscape?
Well, the trend is definitely towards it, and the UAE have been very encouraging towards entrepreneurs, small business, because they've made it so much easier to set up here. I mean, when I first came out here in '94, there were no Dubai internet cities or free zones or anything like that. If you set up a company, you really needed a local sponsor, which in effect gave the local sponsor 51% control of your business. And the UAE looked at this and thought it's restrictive. They wanted to open it up and get people to live, work, and travel from here. And we are fortunate that Dubai and the UAE has a very good geographical position where Al is the biggest port around. So, but you look at it now. Look at the FZ LLCs. You can set up a company in a few days and have a hot desk and be off and running. That was unthinkable 20 years ago. So they're definitely at the forefront of setting companies, being business friendly, shall I say, open for business. UAE is open for business, and you can come here, set up a business and start living and working here as easily as anywhere I've been in the world. In fact, it's probably easier here than anywhere in the world I've been.
Wow, this is an interesting comment. I didn't think I would have actually heard you say that, but well, that's very encouraging for any of our audience members who are interested in setting up their company. But I think beyond just the ease of setting it up, you obviously need to have something else to be successful. So what are the success factors that you've seen or witnessed that pay off and produce companies that are successful and reputable? And I'm not even talking about the obvious things here, which is a great idea and a feasible idea, but maybe more in the aspect of the qualities of the entrepreneur.
Yes. I mean, you're looking at, it's a difficult, there's no sugarcoating this. It's particularly for young people, it's a tough environment out there. Everywhere in the world, and the UAE is no different. But really and truthfully, if you're looking at starting your own company, you have to look at yourself first. I think in education we call it reflection. Is it really for you? Because if you want a regular salary and have use your free time for you, then don't do it, because your personal characteristics are a great base from which to start. You can't just all of a sudden say, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur next week and start your own company up. Well, people do. They think it's easy, that the same way that people go into teaching thinks it's easy. It's okay, I can be a teacher. And I say, frankly, you can't. There's a skill set to improve and learn here. And, being able to think on your feet, that's the real thing. It's not a case of, you can't get a list of how to be a great entrepreneur and it works for everybody. The same as you can't in leadership. those soft skills need to be worked on and honed, and you need to be a good networker, and you need to have a plan, and you need to be driven to go and see that plan through. That's the difference, because we're all very good at talking about things, but procrastination is real, and it's only talk, and it's only a dream, unless you're prepared to put that dream into action and have a path to go and activate your dream, because there's going to be issues. The plan will change, but you have to have something in place, because the famous quote, I can't remember who it's from, is I do like it and I use it: if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably end up somewhere else.
Nice.
Yes, yeah. Brilliant. It's very simple, but if you don't have a plan, if you don't have it doesn't have to be a definitive 90-page document, but you need to be able to know where you are now, where you want to be, and how you get there. And that's personally and professionally, I believe.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And so you've spoken quite a bit about networking and how important it was in the past, particularly when we didn't have any social media networks, right? So do you think there are any lessons learned that we can apply from the previous models onto the current business landscape and the current situation?
Yes, I think they can both live very happily together. I firmly believe that you should still be comfortable, happy and communicative in the face of other humans. You mustn't lose that skill, because poor old millennials, they get such a bad time, and I believe you're one of them, Beth. But millennials get a bad time because they've been brought up in a time where you have all this stuff on tap. Now that's great. It's great that you can still network on LinkedIn and other apps and other platforms, but you're never going to get the best information, the latest gossip, who's moving to who, what's happening, unless you get your bum off the seat and get out there and get amongst it. Because networking within your industry and those industry trade associations and conferences, things like GTECs, those sorts of things, they're brilliant for networking and finding partners and collaborating with. You can't do that online.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. And Pearson Professional has actually been organizing face-to-face events specifically for that purpose, so that students can get a feel of what's happening in class, and they can see the professors, they can see what we are and who we are. And I think the response from these events has been much better than any kind of social advertising, because when people can actually touch something that they're about to be a part of, see that experience for themselves, I think it develops different kind of relationships altogether, so that they're more inclined to join and see what it's like for themselves.
Yeah, I don't think. It's a bit like data-driven in education. People are obsessed with data in education, and that's great. It should be a backup to education, not the driving force. And I think that having these apps, having LinkedIn, having connectability with people around the world is absolutely fantastic, but not at the loss of being able to walk up to someone, speak to them, and have a connection. Because ultimately, I know it's an old chestnut, but people do buy from people.
Yeah.
I know we do a lot of online shopping, but that's for products. If you're selling services, it's not as likely that you'll be as successful, especially business to business. It's all about relationships and trust, and you can't build that up simply with an app.
Absolutely. No, agreed. And speaking of the ability to come up to people and network as being part of the crucial factors to success, what struck me the most during one of our sessions is that you tied together the importance of having high emotional intelligence with the success of entrepreneurship. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that? I think that's absolutely fascinating.
Yes, well, I've tried to gain some, being male, over the years, and I think I have. But I think in sort of layman's terms, or layperson's terms, it's actually connecting and reading people. The ability to be able to read situations and understand where other people are coming from. Listening, having some people definitely should go on a proactive listening course. And I wish I'd had when I was younger, because there's no doubt about it, the more I shut up, the better I got at business.
Interesting. And I don't think a lot of, especially younger crowds, would have a tendency to agree with you, but I definitely think that is the case as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And the more you absorb from the environment, the more you listen to what others people say, the more you further hone and refine your own communication skills.
Yes, and you never know, you might learn something. Even my age, I can still, and I still want to learn from situations and other people. And listening is a key skill. And I know it sounds daft in a way, but people don't do it often enough. You can change your opinion when you listen to other people, or it might reinforce yours. But also, listening can gain some brilliant market information when you're going around speaking to people and networking. It is it's a good skill, and I think it builds confidence personally as well, because you feel, if you're confident in people's company, and even if it's strangers, you have something in common. There's always something in common with us. It doesn't matter where you're from. So I think it's absolutely key, especially with with Facebook and Instagram, and people living their lives online. Sometimes you've got to live your life not online and be out there, and not be taking selfies. Actually just enjoying the moment and learning from the moment, actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And to reinforce that learning and our audience actively listening to our podcast and honing their listening skills, to close off, I would like to ask you to share one of your favorite discoveries or experiences when it came to entrepreneurship or innovation. Is there anything that particularly stood out to you in your vast experience?
I think it's a difficult one, that, because I've enjoyed it all. I mean, when I first came out to the UAE in '94, it was a hardship posting, believe it or not, and which people still don't believe. And it wasn't a hardship posting. It was just very different back then. But I think the lesson I learned, that the fundamental lesson, wasn't something like in particular. It was the fact that what I knew and what I did wasn't necessarily fit for purpose in another market. So I learned very quickly that just because you do things like that, it doesn't necessarily happen here. And the buying process, the customer behavior are different in different places. So again, the lesson you learn, and I know it's related to travel, and again, another one of those old chestnuts, is the best education you can get is travel. It's true. Once I came out here, I went to all the other regions from Dubai, and being given, what stood out to me was that we had connections, but the differences in the way people do business and how they do business. And you have to be aware of this. And again, that's down to being in your environment, being able to, learn quickly on your feet and learn from others, because, you can make some awful mistakes otherwise. It took me a while not to try and shake local women's hands here, but they were always very considerate and laughed at me because I was so used to it. Your hand comes out like a piston when you meet new people. Of course, they just look at you and smile and laugh, but you get used to it. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned here is that, you do have to adapt yourself
So the
and your
thing-
business profile.
It doesn't work. Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of, especially Western companies, tend to think that any kind of successful strategy that has worked in Europe and the US, they just copy paste it to the Eastern regions, it will just take off. And I don't think that's the case.
No.
I think a lot of the times companies had to adapt. For example, the successful case of Souk.com, technically it was an Amazon concept or similar to Amazon, but they still had to adapt to the local market to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, that's another course in itself, the difference between international marketing and global marketing. And the issue we've got, the success stories of global marketing tend to be the large American food ones, like McDonald's and KFC and Subway, etc., where there's much more global marketing because the message gets across to all of us. But the smaller companies and the more nimble companies have to do international marketing, which is adapting to that particular region or country. Not every company is McDonald's, I'm afraid, thank goodness. But you can't take away from the fact that their business model has been great, and whether the opinion on the food is another matter. But the business model has been hugely successful. So they're shining lights when it comes to the business side of things. But when you look at it from a global point of view, do you really want to travel to Peru or Poland to have the same cup of coffee and burger? Really? I don't think so. But what do I know? But the international approach, I think, it sets you in good stead. Okay, if you work for a big, large global company, then obviously their marketing is slightly different, but they do adapt to markets, as they all do. There is always an element of adapting to the local market or the local competition, because it's not the same everywhere. And you're quite right when you said the copy and paste, it's not fit for purpose anymore, and it's just lazy. People need to be smarter. They just need to work smarter and be aware of what they're doing, but where they're doing it.
Makes total sense. So the bottom line of today's podcast is get out of your chair. Don't be lazy.
Yes.
Don't just replicate something that worked before, and study your environment.
Yes.
Is that correct?
I think so. And also looking at yourself as well as your business. You'd expect people to do their homework, or do their due diligence on their own industry and their own market. But also, it's very key to do that on yourself. Be reflective. Do a SWOT on yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Obviously, you never tell anybody your weaknesses, but you can tell yourself. But what are they, and what are the opportunities and threats for you personally? Once you've done that and looked at yourself and your business, and you're all good to go, then go for it.
Thank you very much for that amazing motivational speech, Gary. I think all of our audience members have a few things to think about now. And thank you for a lovely time. I really enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully see you soon in all of our classes. Okay,
thanks very much, Beth. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was good fun. And hopefully, we'll meet some of the people who listen to the podcast.
All right, great. Have a great rest of the day.
And you. Thanks.